BRITNEY is free, life is good, there is power in numbers, and this is a big win for everyone. But speaking of wins, let's talk about Drag Race, and a topic that I thought of while watching the latest episode of Drag Race UK, and that somebody also has suggested. Have there been any instances in Drag Race's history when there should not have even been a bottom two at all? Originally, I worded this as, are there any instances in Drag Race's history when the queens did so well that nobody should have gone home? And then I started going over the episodes. No, that's almost impossible to find. Only in the latest seasons do the judges have those moments of, you are the best top number of queens we've ever had, this is going to be splitting hairs. And then we, the audience, are sat there thinking, no the fuck they're not, what are you guys on? Those weird marketing moments won't be included here. In this video, I will be talking about 5 instances where, yeah, there should not have even been a bottom 2, but not because everybody was great, but because either the judging seemed to have no exact guidelines of what they wanted to see from the queens, or because the challenges should not have even happened. It was a little difficult to find even these 5 instances here, as a lot of the times I would find, let's say, a runway where everybody did well, but then I would remember that in the challenge a fair amount of people sucked, or vice versa. So this is all kind of loose. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that I have a Patreon, and if you're down to clown and join these lovely people, I will not stop you. The link to the Patreon is in the description below. In the 5th place, we have the 9th episode of season 3, where the top 6 of that season had to create a video message themed around their love of the USA, which then would be shown to US military members serving overseas. The queens are told that it should be personal, but entertaining. The latter being something very subjective, let's remember that. So Alexis comes up with a story of her boyfriend being in the military, which later after the season we find out is a complete fabrication. Manila goes full on silly nonsense, Shangela also takes a comedic route, Raja doesn't really do her best here, Carmen is a little too serious, and Yara does what she's been told 100% worked for her in the past in the competition. Now this last bit is an important bit of information, because Yara then got critiqued for that exact same thing. And then on the runway, pretty much everyone but Shangela had really good looks. But not even Shanji's look was bad. In the judging of the queens, some judges praised comedy for some queens, but for the others they did not even enjoy it. For some they liked the more personal and more serious route they went for some they thought it was too much. There were just a lot of weird critiques flying around, especially about Yara's look. She wore a traditional Puerto Rican dress, which the judges did not really respond well to. Even if we were to disregard the fact that Puerto Rico is a territory of the USA, wearing your country's traditional clothing and then also later a flag is as patriotic as it gets. So Yara being criticized on that is pretty nonsensical. Basically, everything she was negatively criticized for just simply makes no sense. Carmen, yeah, she was pretty stiff, distant, and weird in her PSA, and the judges asked her to give them more. She just never did. So her bottom 2 placement makes sense. So I say this, and you're probably thinking, how is this episode on the list if Carmen's bottom 2 placement makes sense? Well, because of the outcome of the episode. Just like the latest episode of Drag Race UK, this episode is a filler episode. In the bottom 2 lip sync, nobody goes home. This was the first time on the show that this happened, so it was a pretty big shock. The queens did not even know that this was an option. To further get my point across of this being a filler episode, Alexis Mateo won this episode's maxi challenge. Manila won the mini challenge. The winner of the season in Raja was very inconsequential this episode, so the episode in itself is not even important to watch when it comes to Raja's or the winner's story. What I'm trying to say is, the episode should not have had a bottom 2 because the episode itself did not even know what it wanted the queens to do. And also because of the flawed US concept of praising their troops who allegedly fight for their freedom, while the country is quite free on different continents, and statistically these same people end up killing around 9 innocent civilians to one possible threat that, also allegedly US funded, but that's neither here nor there. In the 4th place, we have the 4th episode of season 7, Spoof There It Is. In this episode, the queens divided into 3 teams and were asked to create spoofs of Ru's songs. This episode is also infamous for being the first time of the season when Trixie was eliminated. If you ask Trixie, if you ask most of the audience, hell, if you were to ask Pearl from the beginning of episode 5, Trixie should have stayed in the competition. But here's the thing, she shouldn't have even been in the bottom 2. Without googling it, can you tell me what the 3 spoofs were about? I'll start. I vividly remember Tan With You happening, and the parody later that Jade and Max and Violet did. I don't really remember the name, but I remember the concept. And the 3rd spoof, I only remember Mrs. Kasha Davis going, album and a t-shirt, and the fact that the song was making fun of Rue's constantly having something to sell. Obviously, this answer may differ for people, and how the audience interprets something doesn't really matter, / doesn't always align with how the judges interpret something. However, let's look at who were the low queens in that episode. Max, Kandy, Pearl, and Trixie. Max's green look was not the greatest. There was minimal green there, and in the Maxi challenge, Max portrayed Courtney Act, and the main joke she had for her was that she was obsessed with her look, which, yeah, that's somewhat how Courtney was presented to us. So Max was bleh, but he wasn't horrible. Kandy got mixed in the shuffle, but just remember who was in her group. Ginger, Kennedy, and Kasha. It was more or less a given that she would be kind of invisible there. Those 3 are some of the biggest personalities the show had ever had. On the runway, Kandy wore a whatever look that's somewhat green. So again, she was bleh, but not horrible. And then our bottom 2. Let's talk about Pearl first. Are you a stoner girl? Drag Race has this thing where they equate having a personality with being loud. Ariel Versace very correctly pointed this out to Rue, and then she was made to look like a dumbass afterwards, even though she was completely correct. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be deemed as entertaining, as fun, as interesting, as... You add your own adjectives here. Yes, they're making a TV show, but if the show is supposed to reflect reality, because it's a reality TV show, absolutely do give me some of those calmer, more quiet people to watch as well. Another problem with Pearl's judging came with her look. She had, quote-unquote, no body. It was too simple, yada yada yada. First of all, Pearl was very clearly a snake. Could her look have been more elaborative? Yeah, she could have had a train or something to signify the length of the snake. But secondly, and this is another Drag Race fallacy, an hourglass shape and over-exaggerated features is not the only way to have a body. The show tries to preach inclusivity, diversity, and progressiveness, but then mess up with the easiest shit. We know that for Rue, drag is just looking like a woman. So why does nobody ask him why being a woman means having features that historically were forced ideologically on women by men? Was Pearl the weakest in the challenge in her group? Yeah, but she was not awful. Much like Max and Kandy, and with the fallacies that I mentioned, she was bleh, but not horrible. Trixie, lastly, really got the shortest end of the stick. She was the one that wrote Tan With You. So just because of the fact that she wrote the whole thing for her team should have kept her out of that bottom 2. In short, Drag Race is a show full of nonsense, some that is damaging to the overall culture, and some that is just plain stupid. I will 100% understand if you strongly disagree with these last 2 picks. However, I will not allow any ifs, buts, or maybes for these next 3 challenges that I'm grouping and talking about together because they all fall under the same theme of these shouldn't have even been challenges and people doing poorly in them should not be a big deal. Obviously, Drag Race has a minimal variety of challenges. They're like 5, 6, 7 types of challenges that they keep in rotation that test skills specific to what RuPaul used to do. Some sort of singing, acting, hosting, comedy, writing, designing/sewing, and in general performing. You are expected to be at least mediocre at all of this to even have a chance at competing on the show. However, thrice, the show made queens do challenges that would test their skills in things that take people years to perfect, weeks or months to learn. And how much time do the queens get to learn these skills? 2 days max. In the 3rd spot, as it's the lowest offender, we have the ballet challenge from season 5. This challenge is the lowest because not every role in there required the same amount of technique and dancing skills that, again, take ages to learn. Ballet can't inherently be life-threatening, and the challenge was included because of the inclusion of Coco and Alyssa in the season, who are both dancers. The skills that I previously mentioned can also take time to learn and perfect, but you can always kinda ham it up. Acting, learn your lines and listen to the director and you'll be fine. Singing, you can always go by the logic of putting your personality first, and then your talent, or the lack thereof, second. Sewing. Use your old clothes and hot glue. But for ballet, there isn't much you can do to get by unnoticed. However, and again, this challenge was not as dangerous as the cheerleading/tumbling challenge. I've made a whole video about why this is the worst challenge Drag Race has ever done, solely because of how many people here got injured. Let's see. Eureka infamously had to be taken out of the competition after performing a split during the challenge. Charlie Hides, somebody who's only a couple of years younger than Rue, mind you, cracked a rib. Cynthia Fontaine was seen not being able to walk on her own after that episode in Untucked. And I think I heard somewhere that Peppermint also got injured here, but I'm not sure. Do not quote me on that. Regardless, one injury is too many injuries. People that do gymnastics as a competitive sport start very young, like as young as 2 years old, and then trained for years to be active in the sport in their late teens, early 20s, and then they usually have to retire because their bodies are messed up from it. I mean, this is a gross generalization, but I'm just trying to point out how dangerous this was. I won't talk about this any longer. As I mentioned, there is a whole video I did about why this challenge is so bad, so you can watch that if you want. As bad as that challenge was, it wasn't as bad or as dangerous as the professional wrestling challenge from season 4. You remember being a kid watching WWE and getting those little video messages from wrestlers saying, "Don't try this at home." Yeah. The sport is dangerous. There are people who have trained for years that ended up dying prematurely because of either long-term damage done to their bodies or because of one incident in the ring. A friend of mine some time ago sent me a testimonial of a wrestler for lawsuit, I think, who took her own life over 2 years ago, where she detailed just how many injuries and concussions she sustained during her short tenure wrestling and how much pain she was in daily then. She also said that she was never professionally trained. She won a contest or something and was thrown into the ring, learning on the fly and being denied training from the higher-ups. This is more or less what happened to the queens of season 4. The only difference being that they were actually trained. But only for a day or so, which is, again, not good. Obviously, the bumps they took and the moves they did weren't as dangerous as they could have been, and as far as I could find, nobody was seriously injured there, but the point is, nobody in that episode should have been up for elimination, because nobody in that episode should have been doing that challenge, because, again, that challenge in itself should not have even been a thing. Before we end this, I want to thank all my new patrons: Ryan, Brandon, Jordan, Manny, Carlo, Daniel, Jill, Tyler, Steen? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this. Four-Eyed Rabbit, Chua, and Matthew. Thank you all for helping out. And that's it. That's the video. Some may not fully agree with the choices I made or the reasons I gave for the 5 episodes, but honestly, and again, those last 3 challenges, man, like, let's hope Drag Race doesn't put these queens' well-beings in danger anytime soon. Or ever. And I know Dragula makes their contestants do even worse stuff, but ew, look how edgy we are, isn't really my cup of tea. Hope you had a good week, and thank you for watching.